Hey guys, welcome to the Notorious.tv. This is where I cover stories that are scandalous, eccentric, and over the top. You may have noticed that I've been gone for a while. I haven't made a video on here in about 8 months, and that's because I've had a lot going on and I've just had my attention in other places. For one, I lost someone really important in my life last fall. That's my stepdad, Kyle, and it really just still doesn't feel real that he's gone. He was one of my cheerleaders. He's the reason I'm team step parent. I think it's just really cool whenever somebody will enter a child's life and be a positive role model for them, like my stepdad was to me and my brother. And he always got excited when I made a video, and my mom would cue it up on the TV for him and everything, and he just loved it. So rest in peace, Kyle. I miss you very, very much. And I know Kyle, he would want me to keep creating. So on today's episode of the Notorious.tv, we're pulling the curtain back on one of the most dangerous illusions in corporate America. The idea that HR exists to protect you. Because here's the truth, and it's darker than most people want to admit. So let's talk about it. But first, I need to let you know that everything in this video is based on my personal opinions and commentary. All claims, events, and interpretations discussed are alleged. You should do your own research, form your own opinions, and of course, it would mean so much to me if you like this video and subscribe to my channel. I have a lot of content planned, and I would love to have you. Institutional negligence. It's one way the systems meant to protect us become the ones that harm us. And HR departments are guilty of this all the time. HR, of course, stands for Human Resources, and it's the department that employees are expected to go to when they have any kind of complaint or concern or grievance. But HR departments, they are not neutral, and they aren't advocates, and they definitely are not your safe place. They're a corporate liability shield, wrapped in soft language, and even sometimes rebranded with names like people and culture or employee experience, all designed to make you forget what they really are. Because nothing says, we don't give a fuck about you, like slapping a Pinterest-friendly name on a department built to protect the company against you at all costs. Honestly, HR has more aliases than a man who owes child support, okay? But I can actually think of a few more names that are more aligned with what HR actually does, like PG, for example. That stands for professional gaslighters, or maybe NS for narrative spinners, or how about CC for case closers, or DD for documentation dodgers. It'd be like, have you submitted your complaint to DD yet? Oh, maybe you should submit a case to PG. That's more like it. And no offense to anyone who works in HR, but I struggle to understand why anyone would ever want to do that job. I've had 2 run-ins with HR during my career, and from my experience, they conduct pretend investigations while they minimize you, and in the end, they do nothing but put a target on your back. You will walk in with a concern and walk out with a performance improvement plan. I just personally don't have it in me to do that kind of job. It would be very hard for me to treat people like this whenever they're making legitimate complaints and being bullied and harassed at work. And if you think it sounds dramatic, though, let me remind you, there was a case that recently aired on Dateline called Breaking Point, and it covers the story of Morgan Fox in Stark County, Ohio. And this is a story that shows, unfortunately, that in some cases, a company's HR department would rather let something escalate to the point of you being unalived before they actually admit that there's a problem happening on their watch. In October of 2020, Morgan was shot to death one early morning in her driveway as she was getting in her car to go to work. And the crime was committed by this piece of shit named Jason McDermott. He was 29 years old, and he's described as someone who was just really obsessed with Morgan. Now, the incident that took place that prompted Morgan to go to HR is that she was being harassed and bullied mostly by a lot of the men that worked at FedEx with her. And so there was this one day that was just the last straw where they had taken her phone and gone through it, and she could tell that her private photos and things had been gone through. So she felt very violated, of course. And this was just the latest thing in a string of harassment that Morgan Morgan went through. Usually in these situations, at least in my situation, it's not one thing that lands you in HR. It'll be like multiple things that happen and you finally just realize that you kind of have no other choice but to like report a situation. So that is exactly what Morgan did. Whenever her phone went missing, it was actually Jason McDermott who gave her phone back to her. And he said, "Oh, look, I found your phone." Like he was trying to spin it like he rescued her phone. And really what the footage shows, the evidence that was later obtained by police, showed that Jason McDermott was actually the one hiding behind boxes, looking through her phone. He had it for like an hour. So I want to listen to this Dateline clip with you guys. I can't play the video because it actually is like copyrighted. I wasn't able to like screen record it, but let's listen to this clip from Dateline's episode Breaking Point.
3 weeks before Morgan was killed, she had apparently reached a breaking point. One of her coworkers took her personal cell phone. She didn't know who.
After she was looking around for her phone, it was just told to her that a group of guys had the phone, kind of like phone tag. Like, I don't have it, they have it. I don't have it, they have it.
She finally found her phone in the hands of a coworker she considered a friend, and it was unlocked. Morgan could tell someone had gone through it. In tears, she went to Michelle. What was on the phone that made her so concerned?
She had said that they had looked at her personal phone and private pictures.
Right, and she felt violated by that.
She definitely felt violated.
Morgan told Michelle she had complained to management, but almost 2 weeks had gone by and she hadn't heard a response. What Morgan did hear was that she had violated the FedEx dress code.
She was given a form of the dress code so that she could be told she should be wearing khakis instead of leggings. And it seemed disgusting to me that she's asking for some resolution and she's instead getting reprimanded. She stuck up for herself and she said the dress code policy also says no ball caps and all of the male managers wear hats.
So that dress code was enforced for women but not for men?
Apparently.
What you just heard is just a really common HR tactic where, like, if you make a complaint, they're going to suddenly manufacture a performance issue about you. This happened to me one time at a job where it was an unspoken requirement that you had to work off the clock to meet certain deadlines. And I complained about it because there was just no way that I could get my workload done in 40 hours a week. And I'm not going to work off the clock. Like, I'm just not going to do it. But then it turns into like, oh, well, you should be able to do this job in 40 hours, even though there was no one else at the company in my position that had the workload I had. And then it turned into like, oh, well, you're violating our timekeeping policy. Like, if you're working off the clock, you're violating our timekeeping policy. So this is just like the ways that HR manipulates people and really intimidates them is what it's designed to do. So like I said, 3 weeks went by, nothing happened. This is a common HR tactic as well, where they will just stall and pretend like they're investigating, but they're really just trying to coordinate a narrative behind the scenes so that the company can have a united front and have a position that makes the complaining employee look crazy, or at the very minimum makes the company look like they did nothing wrong. The Fox family actually organized a protest where they were protesting outside of FedEx. And at the time, Morgan's mother said, "We are here to let FedEx Ground know that bullying and harassment have no place in a working environment. And if management had done their job correctly, my daughter would still be alive." And I know some people watching might say that this crime could have very well taken place even if FedEx had taken Morgan's complaint seriously. But I mean, let's face it, we will never know because the HR department at FedEx did what HR does. They turned a blind eye and hoped for the best and just hoped that they could stall the situation long enough until they could come up with some optics that made the company look like they weren't in any way at fault. And really that delay in this case ended in a tragedy. According to public records filed in Stark County Probate Court, FedEx paid $4 million to Morgan's family in a settlement. And so that's pretty much corporate language for are bad. They don't just go handing money out for no reason. If you think HR misconduct is rare, let me tell you what happened to me. So if you've ever been in a situation with your workplace HR department, oh God, I would just not wish that on anyone. But if you have, you probably already know that they work in concert with your supervisor to corroborate a story that makes it appear as if the company did no wrong. This is what I've been saying throughout this video. The role of the HR department essentially is to assess legal exposure. And then they want to close the case as soon as possible and keep the employee contained no matter what. Most of the time, like 99% of the time, this strategy works for them because employees are scared of HR. They're very intimidated. And like I said, I've dealt with HR on 2 occasions during my career, and both experiences were negative. If you've had a positive experience with HR, tell us in the comments because I'd love to hear it. And also, if you've had a negative experience, drop that below too. But anyways, one of the times that I had to deal with HR, it led to me being diagnosed with chronic PTSD, where my workplace was the documented cause of the diagnosis. And I know it sounds unbelievable, even to myself. Like if I hadn't lived it, I wouldn't believe it either. If someone was telling me this, I'd be like, stop being such a wimp. Like everybody has workplace PTSD. But, your nervous system really starts to respond to these things. When you're in an environment where you're being harassed and bullied and gaslit every single day, it can be very destabilizing. And so, I wanted to just take a look at some of the symptoms on here because there's a difference between being burnt out and actually having workplace related trauma. So the Center for Treatment of Anxiety and Mood Disorders, they give some signs of workplace PTSD, and those include sudden anxiety when thinking about work or returning to the workplace, sleep problems or nightmares about job situations, feeling jumpy, on edge, or easily startled, emotional numbness or difficulty feeling joy, avoiding people, meetings, or locations connected to work, physical symptoms like headaches or stomach discomfort when work is mentioned, and replaying upsetting interactions or conversations long after they happen. So if these symptoms sound familiar, it could be very helpful for you to explore trauma-informed support. And now I want to go into institutional betrayal trauma. And it's really relevant to Morgan Fox's case. According to Psychology Today, institutional betrayal occurs when an institution fails to protect or actively harm someone who relies on it. Betrayal by someone or something we depend on can have major psychological and relational implications. Naming betrayal for what it is can help us stop internalizing the fear and start understanding the context. It's really sad that instead of validating employees, that HR tends to become complicit to the workplace misconduct. They will just join right in. And these stories are not unique. Like if you Google HR settlements, you'll see a lot of content. You'll see a lot of situations where an employer acted illegally. So just imagine the number of cases that actually turn into a settlement versus like how many total situations there are, because it's very few that are getting reported in the first place. And then even if an employee does report it, HR is going to close the case ASAP. And then for an employee to escalate it externally is like super rare. So that's why a lot of employers just assume that they can get away with this type of behavior because a lot of them have just never been in a situation where they are held accountable. So I would encourage you, if you're going through something like this, be the reason why your manager, your supervisor thinks twice the next time that they underestimate someone. Here's what I wish someone had told me before I ever stepped into an HR department. First of all, most employees don't know their rights, and most employees won't stand up for their rights even if they do know them. So you need to treat HR like a formality, not the last step. And just know that if you're going to take your complaint to HR Only do it if you plan to escalate externally after they don't help you. Otherwise, you'll be out in the wild while your company just starts to manufacture performance issues until they can make a case to let you go. Because trust me, that's what's going to happen. Because now, since you complained, even if it's a legitimate complaint, they see you as a troublemaker. And of course, you want to make sure that you really do have a legit legal issue related to discrimination or retaliation based on protected activities or being part of a protected class. So do your research. If you're the only one that didn't get invited to happy hour, that is not illegal, okay? So do your research, make sure that you actually have a leg to stand on. It's work, you have to know it's work to exercise your rights. That's why it's called exercising your rights. Don't expect an overnight resolution. Be prepared to fight a war with many battles. And I know a lot of employees will say, oh, you have to pick your battles. And it's so true. Totally agree. But don't let illegal behavior slide. When you do that, it just perpetuates management's grandiose delusions that they're just too important to be held accountable, and we don't want that. I personally just won't stand for that shit, and neither should you. Now, there are a couple of employment attorneys that I found on YouTube and social media who put out great content, and I want to tell you about them because they talk about employee rights, and it just really helps you know if you have a legitimate legal complaint to hear about other cases. Regina Molden on YouTube, you can find her, Regina Molden Law. She practices in Georgia, which that's not my state. It really would help you to find an attorney in your state, but really a lot of times these are federal issues like discrimination and retaliation and things like that based on protected classes and protected activities. These are federal laws. All of these attorneys I'm telling you about here are well versed in that. Now, attorney Ryan on Instagram, I really love him. I love his attitude. He is, he reminds me of myself in the sense where he's like, don't put up with that shit. Like, that's where I'm at. It's like, would your manager tell the same story under oath when the standard is perjury? Don't be afraid to put your manager in a deposition if it comes down to it. There's also Paige Sparks. She's on Instagram, very talented at terrorizing employers who think that they're going to treat employees in an illegal way and get away with it. So mad respect to her as well. And one of the things that all these lawyers will tell you is how important it is to document absolutely everything. My advice to you, any communication you have is evidence. Blind copy your personal email account so that way it's not tied to a work device. Because if you only have your documentation on your work device and they fire you, you're screwed. So, create a timeline on your personal Google Drive that you can keep adding to in real time, because you'd be surprised how much information you can forget as time goes on. And so, leverage your Google Drive, keep all of your documents and stuff organized in there, and you can link to them in your timeline. So everything's just very interactive. Any attorney would appreciate that. And it would also save you money if you do get counsel, because then that's less hours they're having to bill you when you have everything just clean and accessible right there. If you're going through this, you are not alone, because it can feel really lonely, like you're carrying something that's just so heavy all by yourself. When you're being gaslit, it could just be a very destabilizing experience. You may start really doubting yourself and you're overreacting. You might have thoughts like, maybe I shouldn't have complained. Maybe, it's not that big of a deal. But, if you can afford it, talk to a therapist who specializes in employment trauma. I know for me, this really helped to validate my experience. And also, if you see that your company has an employee assistance program, many do. And they offer free counseling sessions to employees. And it's totally confidential because, of course, they're bound by HIPAA. And you may also benefit from this book that I'm going to link in the description. It's about workplace bullying. So if you've ever been a victim of a workplace bully, which I know I have, I was shocked. It's the first time I've ever been gaslit, for real, in my whole life. So here's a book that my therapist actually recommended to me, and maybe it will help you out as well. Now, don't let being broke stop you from escalating something externally, because there are a lot of attorneys that will give you a free consultation to evaluate if you really have a legitimate case. And if they do see a legitimate case, some of them will work on a contingency where they will just take a percentage of the severance that they're able to negotiate for you. So even if you don't have a lawyer, though, you can file a complaint with the EEOC on your own. The process is really designed for regular workers to go through it without a lawyer. There's a YouTuber actually who got a settlement from NASA, and she has a lot of great content on her YouTube channel that will help steer you through the process if you do file an EEOC complaint and if you are representing yourself. Her channel is called Fight Employment Discrimination, and I found it really helpful. She'll guide you kind of through like some tips if you do go through the complaint process. And this is the point in the video where I share another heartbreaking HR horror story. So we talked about my stepdad earlier, Kyle, but now I want to introduce you to my biological father, Steve, who I loved very much. And I'd like to dedicate this video to him actually, and here's why. My dad, he passed away in August of 2024, so really sucks. I lost like both of my father figures in such a short time. Kyle actually went to my dad's funeral, and then, it was just over a year later, we're having Kyle's funeral. But like I said, my dad, he was on home hospice and he passed away in August of 2024. And on his deathbed, one of the last things that he managed to ask was why he was fired from the job he loved. So rewind to a few years earlier, my dad, he was disabled. He took dialysis treatments 3 times a week, and he worked at a place that he loved it so much. I won't name them in this video, but he actually worked at this particular institution 3 separate times. And during his final stint at this organization, his boss let him go. And the only reason she gave him at the time was that he's stuck in an old way of thinking. Okay, so first of all, can we say age discrimination? Because that's exactly what a statement like that is. But my dad, he didn't have it in him to sue the place that he loved so much and that he built so many great memories at. And instead, he just went on to start his own counseling practice, and he spent years racking his brain wondering what he did wrong. So when he was dying on home hospice, like I said, his boss who fired him came by and we gave her a moment alone with him. Now, by this point, my dad, he was in and out of consciousness. He was on morphine, and he ended up having no memory of her stopping by. And later when he did wake up, I asked him, I'm like, hey, do you remember her coming by? And he said, no, he did not remember. And so I commented, oh, well, that's too bad. Like, I thought maybe she could clear up like the reason you were fired. And he goes, did she happen to say why? So it just pisses me off so bad that my dad went to his grave wondering why he was fired. But the truth is pretty obvious. I mean, they were discriminating against him because of his poor health, and that is against federal law. That is against the Americans with Disabilities Act. My dad deserved justice, and if you've been the victim of a toxic company HR department, so do you. If you can relate to this video, drop a comment down below to share your story. Your story matters, and sharing it might help someone else survive theirs. You are not crazy, you are not overreacting, and you are definitely not alone. That's all for now. Thank you so much for watching.